Hi, I'm Tracy Ford, the editor of RCR Wireless News, and I'm here at Mobile World Congress with Dan Hayes, an analyst with PRTM, which does a lot of consulting work. So, as an analyst, what are you looking for at this show? What big trends do you expect to see?
Well, Tracy, we're looking for a lot of information and a lot of new announcements around 4G wireless in particular. Particularly, there's a lot of buzz this year around the business models and the way that people are really going to make money as they build out their 4G networks. 2011 is really the year of 4G, and so we're expecting to see a lot of conversations taking place around what are the new services, what are the new ways that carriers will make money, and how are they going to justify this next wave of investment in wireless.
Drilling down a little further, do you expect there to be a lot of talk about tiered pricing plans or M2M kind of? There's a lot of new revenue opportunities, but I'm just wondering, consumers kind of like to keep their wireless spend where it is at.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in the fact that there is only a limited amount of money that people have to spend on wireless services. So you're going to need, as an operator, to continue to provide value to the carrier or to the customers, and going to need to continue to be creative on how you brand and how you price. Tiered pricing is one element of it. We expect to see that happen. We also expect to see operators start to talk about how do we really connect new devices like digital cameras and other consumer electronics to wireless networks to enable new applications for consumers. But there's another side of it as well. We're seeing a lot of interest from the operators and from their suppliers in rethinking how they actually deploy and operate wireless networks. Some of the exciting advancements that have happened over the last couple of days with announcements include things like tiny cell sites that you can fit in the palm of your hand that threaten to completely change how you deploy and operate wireless networks. It may become much less of a technical exercise, and you may find that you can deploy wireless, particularly 4G broadband, in places that you could never do so economically before. So we think there's a lot of opportunity for completely new operational strategies that'll really change the costs associated with operating wireless networks.
How does the wireless operator stay relevant in that equation? I mean, are they no longer going to be the network operator? Do you see that trend?
Well, there's a lot of interesting developments taking place in that space. On the one hand, operators need to think beyond just the current generation of technology and really have a roadmap for how they want to advance their networks and how they want to continue to build capabilities into their wireless offerings. On the other hand, there are entirely new models, and in particular, the convergence around LTE is enabling people to rethink business models. In the United States, we have two wireless operators that are going with completely wholesale models now, Clearwire and LightSquare, and they threaten to completely disrupt the business models that we see today. They're offering the opportunity for brands to enter the market and essentially threaten to disintermediate the wireless operators altogether. It may be that to be a wireless operator in the future, because of the level of standardization of technology, all you really need is a brand and a storefront, even just an online one.
So that didn't work so well in the U.S. market for MVNOs. What will they have to do different this time?
Well, the difference with what I'm calling sort of MVNO 3.0 is the third go-round. The difference is that before, the MVNOs were having to compete with their supplier, the company that was actually providing the network. So they were running on a network that was actually being operated by their competitor. So they were at a fundamental cost disadvantage. Mobile broadband actually is leveling the playing field in that regard, in that we have a new generation of competitiveness taking place. There's also just the notion that operators are still struggling with how to be more than the proverbial dumb pipe. And there's an opportunity for strong brands to actually create a new experience for their users and allow them to offer services that identify with them. For example, you could see the AAA, the Automobile Club, offering lots of navigation services and travel services bundled in with mobile broadband. Mobility is a fundamental part of what their brand is all about. They're about getting in your car and going someplace. So there's an opportunity for them to think about, how do I become a service provider?
So do you think a company like that will use a LightSquared or a Clearwire network to deliver services to, I mean, do you see that MVNO 3.0 being similar to what we saw with branding in the MVNO 2.0?
I think there are some similarities and there are some differences. The differences are that the wireless ecosystem is much better developed today. It's the hurdles to getting billing and customer care and those types of things up and running are much less than they were 5 or 10 years ago. So we're seeing a new opportunity for MVNOs to compete. Also, there is the opportunity now for services above and beyond sort of simple voice services that were really prevalent during the first and second waves of MVNOs. And while they certainly failed, it seems like there's a real opportunity now for MVNOs to see a resurgence now that we have mobile broadband and all of the data-centric services that it offers.
So I find it interesting that you're saying, on the one hand, the operator can kind of go away, become wholesale, and still be successful. And then we're talking about new MVNOs coming into the space and that they can do billing and those kinds of things. So how does an operator remain relevant?
Yeah, well, there is a divergence there, and it's real. The challenge for the operators is to think about how do they compete with these new entrants. We have companies coming that have no legacy systems, no embedded processes, no networks that they're having to depreciate and pay for that are part of their install base. They're coming with greenfield 4G networks, and they have the opportunity to really think about the model from the ground up. The challenge for incumbent operators is going to be, how do you actually compete in that environment where you have a lot of overhead and a lot of embedded organization and infrastructure that you have to pay for? One great example is backhaul. We have backhaul out there that today is largely using copper, and you have a disruptive opportunity to have microwave and fiber-based backhaul. If you're a new operator, you just start there. You don't have to worry about transitioning from the old generation, about all of the cost of cutting over existing sites. So it's actually a real opportunity, but there's an imperative for the existing incumbent operators to really think about how are they going to cross over this new generation.
What about over-the-top providers? How do they fit into this equation?
Well, I think there are always opportunities, for people with different business models, with new philosophies and new operational models. Over the top is no example to that, or no exception to that. But I think that they still are going to have to rethink their own operating structure. And again, it all comes back to, how do you make money in this environment? That's been the real challenge. You could argue that 3G has been kind of a wash. A lot of operators haven't seen that massive uptick in revenue that was really promised by 3G. And now the question is, how can 4G be different?
Talk about devices a little bit. Are you planning to look at a lot of devices this week?
Yeah. Well, I think we saw a tidal wave of new devices come through at CES back in January. We do expect to see some additional announcements here that we're looking to sort of avoid the noise that they had back in January with hundreds and hundreds of new devices announced. I think the story here in Barcelona is really going to be about smartphones. We expect later this year for smartphone sales to actually cross over and become the majority of new phone sales in the wireless industry.
In the U.S. or worldwide?
In the U.S. and in Western markets overall.
Okay.
I think we're still seeing, there's some time to catch up in India and China, but they're moving very quickly. With phones right now, really the interesting part becomes the battle of the operating systems. We have the iPhone, of course, which rumor has it we're going to hear shortly about some new platform derivatives of the iPhone with smaller form factors, less costly price points. But the iPhone is really being seriously challenged by Android, both on the smartphone front as well as on the tablet front. We recently conducted some research around tablets and found that over 100 tablets have been announced now, and the vast majority, about 2/3 of them, are actually utilizing the Android operating system. Apple has a strong market position, but they're down already. They're from 95% to 75%, and we expect to see that tick down as new entrants come into the market. But I think the real story here is going to be smartphones, and in particular, how do the OEMs differentiate what's become a pretty ubiquitous product, and how do they make a difference? I personally think that there are lots of opportunities, and they're going to come around small innovations. My favorite innovation of last year was actually the kickstand that HTC put on their Evo product. It was a brilliant little move for a device that's being used to view videos and do things like video conferencing. And it was a simple industrial design feature that really didn't have technology behind it, but it stood out in the eyes of the consumer.
And we haven't heard anything. They must not break off either. It must work, because there'd be stories if it was,
That's right. That's right.
Trashed, it'd be
it's
all
certainly
over.
better than trying to prop it up with a book.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on the Nokia Microsoft announcement then?
That is a really interesting move in the wireless industry. To take two powerhouses in their respective industries like Nokia and Microsoft and put them together has the potential to have a really interesting effect and really powerful. I think in particular, Nokia brings world-class manufacturing. Nobody is better than them in high-volume mobile device manufacturing with high levels of reliability and low cost. And you add to that Microsoft's ability to generate not only the operating system, but the ecosystem around it for developers. It could be a really powerful platform. And I think Nokia in particular is bringing a lot of distribution channels to this partnership. And Microsoft and Nokia did reveal that there were going to be significant payments to Nokia. I think a lot of that has to do with just how much access they have in the market worldwide. In some markets, Nokia still has 50% of the market share, which is really unheard of in the wireless industry.
So, did Microsoft need Nokia more than Nokia needed Microsoft then?
I think that actually it was a mutual need. Nokia really needed to do something revolutionary to shake up its own organization and to reinvigorate its position in the marketplace. Symbian has fallen to I think fifth place in the number of apps that are available for it, and MeeGo seemed to be lagging behind. So it seems that Nokia really did need something, and Microsoft clearly needed a strong partner, a big win, to catapult Windows 7 into the prime time. It was announced a year ago here in Barcelona, and it's certainly a compelling operating system, but it really hasn't won over the hearts and minds of the mobile device manufacturers just yet.
In my very first Mobile World Congress was actually a 3GSM show in Cannes, and again, I think it was the year that Microsoft's big splash in wireless, and they still just haven't quite gotten there yet.
I mean, I worked with Microsoft 15 years ago on mobile devices when I was working for Intel, and of course, Intel and Microsoft have a close relationship, and we're really interested in making mobile devices a reality. And interestingly, the one who came to market first was Nokia with their 9000 communicator, and they did it on their own in Nokia's historical fashion. They had their own operating system, but it's really an opportunity now. I think Microsoft has had a lot of false starts, and I think they've realized as the volume of smartphones and phones in general has crossed over and actually become larger than that of PCs, that it's a market they can't afford to ignore.
I think it's interesting that, again, 5 years ago we would not have been talking about HTC, Apple. So in the next 5 years, you can't say Nokia and Microsoft are done old news, because everything in this industry changes that way.
That's right, yeah. And this year, and one of the themes we're looking forward to hearing about a lot at the show is really the rise of the Asian competitors. And we're seeing a rebirth in some cases, and the birth of new competitors that really have risen to legitimacy on the world stage. HTC is a great example of that. A few years ago, they were manufacturing phones for other people with other people's brands. Now HTC has become a legitimate brand of its own with some of the most innovative devices that are out there on the market. At the same time, you have network equipment manufacturers like Huawei, like ZTE, that are really taking the world by storm. Much of it is because they've realized that in many ways, mobile networks have become somewhat of a commodity, and they've really excelled at low-cost, high-volume type of type of manufacturing and development so that they can meet the needs of operators, especially those that are being challenged to really reduce their costs.
Good. Last question. Is there anything else you're looking forward to at the show that's a theme you'd be pursuing or anything that...
Well, I think the big theme that we're watching right now also, and it stretches across all the segments of the wireless industry, is consolidation. It's clear that in most segments of the market, there are just too many players today. And we're starting to see some of that consolidation taking place. In services, you have the roll-up that's taken place in the UK. You've had companies like Zain doing transactions in the Middle East and Africa. We're starting to see some of that and some word of it taking place in the US. Some of these wholesale models could actually serve as a catalyst for consolidation of the service providers. At the same time, you have consolidation opportunities also in devices and in network equipment. We've seen now Motorola sort of stumbling and trying to regain its ground on the basis of Android. We've seen Nokia now taking this move with Microsoft. It's pretty clear that there are still too many mobile device manufacturers, and likewise in network equipment. We already have seen over the past few years the combinations of Alcatel and Lucent, Nokia and Siemens. We're likely to see more of that, particularly as pressure from Asia rises. We think that there's going to be additional consolidation in the networking industry and in the wireless industry end to end. And that's going to be opportunities for a lot of people, but it's also going to take a few years for it to sort of come together.
Thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Tracy.